Hi, I'm Patrick Manning at Black Desert Resort. We are proud sponsors of Beyond the Game. I recognize that wins aren't always measured by points. Scoreboards don't always define champions, but the story this athlete has to tell, it does. This is why Black Desert Golf Course is proud to sponsor Beyond the Game to share this inspiring story with you. Please enjoy.
You're listening to the Utah Checkdown Podcast. And now your host, Josh Furlong.
Welcome back to another edition of the Utah Checkdown Podcast. We're 2 days away from football. How is everybody feeling about that? I think that's an exciting time. Depending on when you're listening to this, maybe it's game day. I don't know. Either way, football's back. We're excited to have it. I've said for many weeks that I'm tired of just having the same conversations. Right? It's all the same speculation and everything that we have. You know, and you're seeing this Utah team on paper, and they stack up really well. And you know, we've got a lot of these conversations going on, but now it's just time for the football to be played. Like, let's just see how it is. You know, is Utah going to be good? Are they going to be bad? I don't think they're going to be bad. But, you know, what's this transition going to look like for Utah in the Big 12? We're just excited to see it, right? That's our job. At least that's my job. So we're excited to be able to move forward with that. So got a fun guest today. But before we introduce him, I want to tell you about our partners, Black Desert, who are helping with the KSL.com Beyond the Game video series. The videos highlight various athletes and give an inside look into their life. Recently, we talked with former Utah offensive lineman Garrett Bowles about how a second chance at life allowed him to pay it forward to troubled youth. You can check out that video and many others on KSL.com. Black Desert is a new resort destination in St. George that features a championship Tom Weiskopf 19-hole golf course that combines a private club feel with destination resort golf amid lava fields and 360-degree vistas. Black Desert is changing entertainment in southern Utah, and they're just beginning. Black Desert, where remarkable is within reach, home of the Black Desert Championship PGA Tour. All right, so as I mentioned, have a special guest, and this special guest, he's been writing for KSL.com for the last few years. I saw his work at Pick Six Previews, and you know, we struck up a conversation, and I saw kind of his love of Utah. And so I wanted to see if he'd be willing to write about Utah and BYU to kind of see his stats and all the different things and kind of his insight from a maybe more national perspective. He's a guy that doesn't write for a national outlet, but he does have his preseason magazine. And, I wanted to kind of get his take on it. A guy that doesn't have any ties to the state of Utah, but has for the last now 3 years writing for us for BYU and Utah. So it's been fun to be able to have him. But I wanted to pick his brain a little bit, kind of get his take on the season, how he's viewing it. He, as he'll mention, you know, he's going to talk about his preseason magazine and kind of where he sees Utah and why he has them in a favorable spot. So with that, I'd like to introduce Brett Ciancia. All right, joining us today is one of our favorite people at KSL.com. He contributes for us, writing about BYU and Utah, and he might have a little bit of knowledge about college football. He has a little thing called Pick Six Previews. You may have heard of it. His name is Brett Ciancia. Brett, how are you doing, and how's this time of the year going?
Hey, Josh, thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's a busy time of year here at Pick Six Previews with the annual preview magazine going out mid-July. It's been out 6 weeks now as we lead up to the 2024 season. And, you know, it's been a season of change. It's the conference realignment, the playoff expansion, all the transfers you could think of. So it's been a busy year, and I'm really excited to be back at KSL again. I love contributing there on the newspaper and the website. And we're getting to interact with two of my favorite fan bases. I'm not just saying it. I've been a fan of these bases and programs for a long time, even all the way out here in Pennsylvania, because I could tell that they love college football as much as me. They're very passionate. And you'll see them arguing every day of the year, 365-day battle. So it's great to be writing with you guys again.
If I remember correctly, and you've been doing it before then, but in 2019, you got locally, you got a lot of publicity here for where you picked Utah. You had them as a playoff team. They, are obviously really close that season. What kind of helped you kind of latch on to Utah, and where did you how have you seen them grow from that time period?
Yeah, well, like I said, based in Pennsylvania, but I'm up till 2 a.m. every Saturday night watching the Pac-12 finish up. And I felt like that was an area that I was able to gain some advantage because a lot of the national folks, some of the other magazines, I know they're not as tuned into the Pac-12. It's just nature, it's just timing, but I love it. I love that conference. I'm going to really miss it. But yeah, over the years, I started to appreciate Utah's physicality. They're all those buzzwords you think of, the locker room, the culture, the schemes, the styles of play. I started to love all of it, learn more about them. Noticed the fan base was really passionate. And I don't know how the stadium is set up with the cameras, but on a big third down jump, that the stadium cameras are shaking like it's the 80s again. So I was really fond of their program and their base. And then leading into 2019, I really loved that defense. And I had a lot of respect for what they were building. I loved their quarterback and running back combo. And I think the AP poll had him about 15th or 14th, but I went all the way and put him 4th. And that got a lot of attention. And if you recall, they made it all the way. They lost once in the regular season, but they were still sitting there on that last weekend with a win and in scenario. If they were to beat Oregon in the Pac-12 title that Friday night, they would have been in the bracket. But unfortunately ran into a machine there with Oregon. So got all the way to the last day of the season with it. Came close. I came close again with Utah a couple years later. They did win the Pac-12, but they had a second loss that season. So yeah, it's been a way that I've been able to pick up some points here in the magazine accuracy game.
I want to talk about Utah a little bit more, obviously, but I want to kind of get into kind of how this all came about for you. Phil Steele forever has been kind of like the icon of preseason magazines. You have Athlon Sports. There's a bunch of other ones out there. To undertake this as somebody that, you weren't tied to a publisher. This is just something that you started with a friend, is, I would assume, as a pet project. Kind of how do you kind of prepare for that, knowing that you are going up against those big names, but now you're in this and you've become the most accurate. You've got a lot of stats that back up what you do. How did you get here, and what does it take to kind of put out a magazine each year?
Yeah, thanks. Well, yeah, I mean, I was a reader of all the magazines when I was growing up. I loved college football, especially coming from a pro sports area here outside of Philadelphia. It's all pro talk, but I always loved the college game and the uniqueness that brought. So out of a passion of college football, and, I was reading all the magazines, but then I started to devise my own formulas, my own numbers to try and get an edge against those magazines and try and out-predict them, try and find my own edge. And over the years, I started, like I said, accumulating my formulas, my stats. And then I figured, hey, if these are interesting to me and I'm doing pretty well at picking games and seasons, I bet that others would like to see this stuff too. So then I took some time and built out Pick Six previews, put together. Now it's a whole magazine, a hard copy edition. And just really, how I designed it was things I found interesting that I think other football fans would like to see. And I think it's been reflected in that, in the popularity. It's started to grow a little bit. So, and then, yeah, when I found out that they're keeping score, and I'm a really competitive guy, I'm a numbers guy, I'm a football guy, but a really competitive guy. And when I saw that they were tracking the accuracy rankings of all these publications, I knew that was the target. So, yeah, the first 10 years in, I'm number one over the 10-year span, and then had the 5-year as well. So it's really a point of pride going up against, 100 or 200 people staff and magazines as a one-man show. So that's been my point of pride, and it's opened up a lot of opportunities. I mean, I've been able to talk to head coaches and coordinators and do all kinds of radio and podcasts across the country. So it's been great to get that going. So that's how it started. That's how it's going. And I just love connecting with fellow college football fans.
What was that first experience like when you did get ranked and they did say that you were number one? I mean, what was that feeling like?
Oh, it was huge. It was a great relief. It was kind of the proof of concept that the everything I've been working towards, the numbers, watching a ton of game tape, spring games, I watch it all. So just to see that come to fruition, but my mind started racing immediately. All right, I got to go defend the title now. 1 year is not going to cut it. So, and then it was defended a third year, a fourth year, and it became like I got addicted to getting all the best data and winning this thing. So, but the end result is, I think, a really complete guide to the season. I try and make it readable too. It's not as many acronyms or advanced metrics and stuff. It's very readable. It's got some stat graphics if you like that stuff, but really painting the picture of what these teams are trying to build. So hopefully that's reflected through on the pages, and we'll continue it here in 2024.
Honestly, I love it. I think it's one of the magazines that I look forward to the most, and that's not just because I have you contributing here. There's a reason why I have you write for KSL.com. It's because I like it. I think you do a good job. So
thanks.
It's fun. So let's jump into Utah. Utah, you have them predicted to win the Big 12. That's not a shocker for most people. You have them ranked number 8 in the preseason rankings. Kind of what led to this in your mind? Just kind of a general overview of kind of how you put them there.
Yeah, well, general overview, I think first you got to look back at 2023, and a little bit uncharacteristic of a season for Utah in the win-loss record. But when you look at what happened to this team injury-wise, it's actually impressive. They were able to grind out 8 wins and beat USC, and because I'd never seen anything like it. All the years I've been covering college football, I've never seen such an injury run. The number, I think, was 157 starts that were lost to injury from the 2 deep. It's insane. And it was key players too. It was Cam Rising, your quarterback, the backup, even the third stringer was injured. And then you had your all do-it-all tight end Keithy knocked out, your best linebacker, Lander Barton, running backs, you name it. I mean, you guys lived it last year. It was all over the roster, guys getting knocked out. So why I'm saying that all is I think that you can throw a little bit of those results out last year. That offensive numbers, I'm throwing them right out the window because it was such a fluke example with the roster. So I'm calling it the boomerang effect this year, where not only do you get all those injured starters and star players back, Rising, Keithy, Barton, Mekhi Bernard at running back, you get those guys back, but then also you get those younger guys that were thrown in ahead of schedule in relief of those injured players. Now they're coming back as veterans. So it's a double whammy. So yeah, there's a lot to like there. I went position by position. I love the roster. And then specifically a couple things I liked were the additions of Dorian Singer at receiver, 1,000-yard receiver from Arizona and USC. I think Utah has been lacking something like that, a true number 1 vertical threat on the outside. So that's going to be huge. And just a really proven staff. We talked about that with Morgan Scalley on defense and Whittingham overall and Ludwig on offense. And it just all came together in a wide open Big 12. I think I trust Utah's roster and staff more than everyone else.
There's a lot of talk about, Utah's move from the Pac-12 to the Big 12. What's the style going to be like? Is it more physical? All those different things. Utah moving from its Mountain West days to the Pac-12 obviously had a sharp learning curve, right? It was really tough. They had to acclimate to a Power 5 program, get that depth. Now they're transitioning over to another power conference. Do you see, I know numbers don't tell the full story, but when you look at this, do you see similarities between these two conferences, if any, or what are the differences, and how do you think Utah will fare transitioning to a new conference?
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating comparison. I think on the recruiting trail, I think that it's a lot more even of a playing field. I think in the old Pac-12, you had some super recruiters. You had Oregon, who's really taking off as a top 5 national recruiter. USC has always recruited really well with their Southern California location. Who else? Washington's always around that top 25, UCLA, Southern Cal. So yeah, I think that you take all those super recruiters out. And now when the dust settles, actually, if you look at the 5-year high school recruiting ranks in the Big 12, Utah is number 1. They're the number 1 recruiter in this new conference. And that's just shocking to hear, but that's how it is. So I think raw talent wise, that they have a more of an advantage of a starting point. They're really good at player development too, but the recruiting goes a long way. So I think that's one difference. Styles of play, I find a similarity here in that there's so much complexity. In the Pac-12, you had physical teams, you had finesse teams, you had spread, running, passing, you had everything. And I think you have a little bit of that still with the Big 12. Look at some of these really physical programs, just like Utah. Kansas State falls into that category. Iowa State with Matt Campbell and that tough defense. West Virginia with a big offensive line. So you have physical teams like that. You do have some of that old Texas, wild West offense too, with some air raidy type teams and some spread teams. Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, TCU, and Kansas. They're going to spread the ball around the field. So I think for Utah fans coming in, you're going to see a lot of different styles of play, a better talent advantage on paper from the high school ranks. And then one last note I want to put in there is a difference I found is that there's more passionate fans in this conference. They're really going to pack their stadiums compared to some of the empty venues that I saw in the Pac-12. So I think that you're in for some really diehard fan bases. Maybe they're more regional compared to national, but I don't have any problem with that. I think it's you're going to have a lot of packed stadiums and engaging fan bases online.
As somebody that has their name as the Pick Six Previews, Utah's kind of been that team that has the longest streak in the nation. You've followed that a ton. What do you attribute that to, just watching that and just kind of everything? And how great is that for you to be able to kind of have that moniker with Utah?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been calling them Pick 6U. It's a perfect, name with the brand. And I'm always supporting Utah. It seems like each year it's something where my numbers pick up on it more than the rest of the nation in Vegas. I mean, Vegas every year picks USC. Every year I lean Utah, and I've been proven right. So, but the pick six stat, I think it's 20 straight years that the defense has had an actual pick six in a game. And that goes all the way back to when Scally was a player, not a coach. So it's a tremendous streak. It's the longest current active streak. I don't know about all time. I figure it's got to be the longest all time, but longest current active streak. I attribute that to just the mindset that Scally puts in his players. His ball hawk and smart, nasty, reliable ball hawks, or whatever his acronym is. Every coach has mantras like that, but his really is reflected in his players. I mean, they're getting after the quarterback. They're altering his throws, batting balls into the air, and when those balls get batted up, that's easy pickings for an interception. And then they can close. I mean, once they get that ball in their hands, that defense knows how to close. So it's impressive to watch. And I think they'll make it 21 straight years this fall, I'm sure.
You've got a lot of numbers that you track, and you put through a few of those every single week when you put it on KSL.com. But what are maybe some of the numbers that you're most intrigued with for this Utah team, knowing that last year was such an anomaly on offense? Defense, they're pretty consistent, but maybe what are some of the numbers that you're looking at that fans should be interested in as well?
Yeah, well, I think it's all about the pass game. And I put this in my article. I think it'll go up later this week at KSL, looking at some key metrics to predict how Utah will fare in 2024. And right away, you got to start with the pass game. And I know it was an anomaly because they were on to their third and fourth and fifth quarterback, and even a safety at quarterback at sometimes. But I think you got to have tremendous improvement there for this whole Big 12 title thing to work out. And I think it will. I think with Cam Rising back healthy, Isaac Wilson has impressed, and they're in the backup role, local 4-star guy. So I think you're in for massive improvement there. In the passing game, Utah was 100th and 105th last year out of 130 FBS teams. That's got to improve, and it will. I think they'll get back towards that top 40, especially with the addition of Singer on the outside and getting Keithy back and Carson Ryan. There's a lot of good parts. So that was the key metric on offense. Defensively, more of a positive spin. The rushing defense was incredible last year. Top 10 in all my advanced metrics on rushing defense. They actually held the number one spot heading into October before they got a little bit worn down with injuries. But I put that in there as an important piece. Got to continue that. That's going to be the foundation of the program and the team, is that front seven, that rush defense. So those are the two areas I looked at in the article.
I know you're not necessarily doing projections in terms of you expect a guy to get this many yards or whatever that may be, but in your mind, where does Cam Rising have to be in terms of passing to be able to get this team to where you think they should be at that top 8 or even higher, getting into that playoff spot?
Yeah, well, I think the yardage is one thing. I think more the efficiency, the QB rating, the touchdowns to pick ratio, the third down conversions, those kinds of things are keys to games that they got to hit home on, because just the raw passing yardage stat, that's more stylistic. That might mean that Ludwig is either airing it out a ton or he's getting more conservative running the ball. So, I just think having Rising back in the lineup brings you just stability to the offense. He's got that killer instinct when he tucks the ball and runs it when he needs to. So to put a number on it, it's tough. I mean, somewhere around that 3,000 passing yards, something like that. Top 5 in the conference, I think would be great. But more importantly, that QB rating, because that takes into everything. The yards per play, the touchdowns to pick ratio, all that stuff. So the efficiency stuff, I want to see Cam get back into that top 5 in the conference. I had him projected 5th in my QB unit ranks. And that's behind some heavy hitters too. That's behind Noah Fafita, Arizona, KJ Jefferson, the big transfer at UCF, Jalen Daniels, who he's been injured a bunch, but if he stays healthy, he's one of the best in the country. And then I do have Sanders, Shedeur Sanders over at Colorado. He's dynamic and doesn't have much of an offensive line to help him, but he himself is solid. So I have Cam fifth there. I think that'd be a great spot. If he gets near that spot on the QB leaderboard, I think Utah is in a great position.
There's been a lot of talk in the Big 12 about parity, right? That's the deepest conference. That's what the commissioner, Brett Ciancia, wanted to say. There's a lot of people that say it's a wide open race, right? And I think you're seeing a pretty much a consensus that Utah, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and maybe a few others are in that mix of the most likely to be able to get to a Big 12 championship, win it all. I want to know who you see that is maybe that kind of dark horse team that you think could potentially win. I know this is a Utah podcast, so we're going to stick with Utah, but what's maybe that dark horse team that you think could cause some problems in the Big 12?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think across the 4 power leagues this year, this one's the most wide open in terms of number of contenders. You look at the other conferences, they have a dynasty going like a Georgia or an Ohio State. But here in the Big 12, there's no such real power dynasty. I think Utah is the favorite, but you could argue 9, 10 of these teams, or at least their fans can argue themselves, that they're poised for a Big 12 title run. I think a lot of that, it's also unique because they're very veteran rosters this year. For whatever reason, they all timed up where these teams all have a ton of starters back. So you think you have a top 15 number of returning production, and then you look, all your peers are also on that same tier this year in the Big 12. So very veteran conference, no real dynasty at the top, so it's wide open. Dark horse I'd throw in there would be UCF. I think I'm the only preseason magazine to have them ranked in the top 25. Other ones have them, 8th, 9th, 10th in the Big 12. I've got them 4th. And what I really like there is that they already went through their transitional season last year. They moved up from the non-AQ to the Power 5. And as Utah and BYU fans know, it's tough to pull off that transition. They were leading a lot of games late into the game, and then some of those depth concerns and size took over, and they lost a lot of close games in the fourth quarter. I think after a huge transfer haul, they finished top 25 in the transfer portal, top 25 recruiting class, and they really stocked their trenches, their front seven. I think they're better equipped to make a run. And then lastly, we talked a little bit, KJ Jefferson, the big 6'6", 250 quarterback coming in from Arkansas. He's drawing Cam Newton comparisons. That's because of he's paired up with Gus Malzahn, who, of course, led Newton to a Heisman and a national title. So a lot to like from UCF. I'm surprised they're not getting more buzz. I think they're over 7.5 win totals, one of my best bets of the year. And that could be your dark horse.
I have to agree with you on that one. That one's the team that as I've gone through these different teams and looked at everything, everything still has to hit, right? Like you said, the depth and the defense has to improve and different things that way. But this feels like a team that if everything does hit the right way, they could be a very dangerous team. That last game of the year for Utah traveling to Orlando, that's a difficult challenge, right? Like I know everybody wants to circle this Oklahoma State game as Utah's toughest, and I tend to agree. But that UCF game kind of has to leave you up at night thinking, oh, we've got that at the very end of the year. So I'm intrigued by that one. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And Oklahoma State is the conference opener, but that finale, it's going to be tough going down to a hot Central Florida location. And talk about rowdy stadiums. They're right up there with Utah. So that's going to be a tough one. But Utah is still with a favorable Big 12 schedule draw, I think. They'll be favored in a ton of games. Non-conference wise, it's only Baylor. I know that's a schedule quirk this year where that's a non-con, but I think 3-0 from the non-conference, and they're poised well to make a run. So, and then the last tough one I throw in there, I would mention TCU. I think if you talk raw recruiting, transfers, they're right up there. It's a talented roster, and they went through a huge reset after their 2022 title run with Max Duggan and all them. So they're ready for a bounce back in 2024. So keep an eye on that one midseason.
This is obviously a Utah podcast, but I want to just get you out on a little bit of BYU. You have them picked 15th. This is another team that you're covering for us at KSL.com. Generally, what are you seeing from this team that maybe hasn't clicked, right? Like traditionally, I guess 2020, they obviously had that great year. Their schedule was a little bit different. Obviously, they're transitioning to the Big 12. But what do you think has kind of not allowed them to kind of take that next step, knowing that they've been kind of at the bottom right now and still are projected there?
Yeah, well, I think with BYU, they had a really special run of quarterbacks from Zach Wilson for a few years. Jaron Hall continued that trajectory. They were really strong passing. So that was one thing that made them great. The other was their offense and defensive lines. They really pushed around their opponents back as an independent. And maybe that was schedule, maybe that was personnel, maybe it's both. But what I've noticed now is that in this new Big 12 last year, they finished third worst in the country in one of my metrics I call run the ball, stop the run. Of course, that's a famous slogan in football, just the ability to, own the line of scrimmage, run the ball, stop the run. They finished 68th out of 70 last year. And that's combining the rushing offense compared with your rushing defense. Terrible on both sides of that. So to improve at the Power 4 level, they got to keep stocking those trenches and build up their size and depth in the offensive and defensive lines. So those are the two key areas that are holding them back. I don't see quick fixes. It's going to take some time, that being the lines and then the quarterback play.
Well, thank you so much, Brett. I appreciate it. Tell everybody, where they can find you, what you're up to right now, and kind of all that.
Yeah, thanks so much. Pick6previews.com or Pick6previews on Twitter for the annual season preview magazine. We still have hard copies shipping out, 2 or 3 day guarantee. You'll get it before kickoff. Have the digital option as well. And then, throughout the year, I'll be back at KSL contributing the preview articles. So putting in my formulas, my game grader formula, some analysis of the upcoming opponent. So covering Utah and BYU. Cannot be more excited now that these guys are back in the same league. First time in quite a while, and on a collision course to play every year. So I'm really excited to be back, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much, and we'll keep chatting as the season goes on.
All right, sounds good, Josh.
All right, that was my chat with Brett. Obviously, a great guy. Has a good finger on the pulse, so to speak. Does a really good job of putting out that magazine. Honestly, has been one of the most effective and accurate guys out there for the last several years. I really do love his simple approach to it. It's not overly complicated. I do love Phil Still, don't get me wrong. But there is a lot of jargon in there that is a little bit hard to read at times. And so it's nice to be able to have just a clear-cut picture of how teams are viewed. Is he perfect? No, nobody is, right? Like, that's the nature of projections. You're projecting based on what is on paper, what coaches have said, things like that. But as we've seen in years past, and even with Utah last year, injuries can happen or certain things take place that kind of rock the landscape of a team, and you're left to kind of deal with whatever the pieces are left, and it's hard to be able to project a team when things like that happen. So grateful for his answers, and we'll see how it all shapes up. But looking forward to finally having more data to go on than just what we've been speculating about before. So now with that, to close out this episode, I do want to talk about some few things that took place since our last episode, and that is the depth chart was released. So we got the first 2 deep roster from Utah, and by and large, there's not really a ton of surprises here, right? There's a lot of things here that many people that if you've been paying attention to Utah football, or if you've listened to this podcast or seen any articles that I've written or any other writers have written, you kind of have a good sense of who is on this roster, who are the starters, who are the kind of key figures that are going to be in this game. So there shouldn't come as much of a surprise for many people. My favorite thing about this though is looking, and yes, there's still the dreaded or on the roster depth chart, right? But it was used in a much different way than Kyle has traditionally used it for some of these things. It really does come down to the depth that Utah has, and that was most noticeable in a position group like tight end, right? You have 2 listed starters, and that was Dallin Bentley as your tight end Y, and you have Brant Keithy listed as your tight end U. These are the guys that have seemingly done the best. Obviously, we know Brant, so I'm not even going to say seemingly. He has done the best and has earned that quote-unquote starter role. But as we know, if Utah goes into 11, 12, 13, 14, we were joking the other day that Utah should just go with an 06 personnel, put Brant Keithy as a quarterback, use every other position as a tight end and see how it works, but get that offensive line. And I think Utah could actually be pretty effective doing it that way. I don't know what that would look like. I would love to see Caleb Lohner line up in the backfield as a running back and get, Miki Sugarataga or Carson Ryan or somebody like that is his lead blocker, and let's just go. I'm not ruling it out, man. We need that 06. So I think it would be fun. But regardless, you've got 6 guys that honestly could be starters at many programs, right? And once again, that potential has to show up on the field, right? You see their talent, you see their length, you see their ability, and most of these guys have proven it. Carson Ryan did it at UCLA. Landon King has done it at Utah and is still really kind of new into that system and really getting into it, and I think he's become a fan favorite. Brant Keithy's done it. Miki Sugarataga started really picking it up last year after making that switch from the defensive side of the ball. As I've mentioned, Kyle has talked about him being one of the most consistent guys. The biggest question mark of those 6 really is Caleb Lohner. But they love his potential, his ability, his shiftiness. You get a guy that is used to being really shifty on the court as a basketball player with an incredible size, and now he's able to potentially do that on the football field. Oh, by the way, he's probably a foot taller than maybe some of these guys out there. Maybe not quite that drastic, but I mean, you can see the difference. You get a 50-50 ball. Some guys got to have some tremendous hops to be able to, to pick that ball away from Caleb Lohner, especially if you get up and go for it. So really curious to see how that group moves. Your starters at wide receiver, Dorian Singer. You've got Money Parks, obviously has done really well in Utah's system and has kind of put his head down. And he's not being talked about a lot, but that's not because he's not been effective. I think he's just kind of, there's a lot of attraction to the new players, a Damian Alford, a Dorian Singer, even Micah Pittman to an extent, because we didn't really get to see him last year. And by all accounts, he's really bought into the culture. He's really done everything he needs to be able to be a contributing member of this team. And he's listed as the starting slot receiver. So really curious to see how this group works. I think there's obviously a lot of talent. But once again, there really isn't a lot of questions there. The biggest thing there, and this was, it was public in some respects, as some of these position changes, we obviously knew about Hunter Andrews. He moved from linebacker to running back. Kyle talked on Monday about the need for that, where they felt they had enough talent in that room, or in the linebacker room, that they could essentially move him over. They needed another bigger body to be able to get in there. How he factors into this team yet remains to be seen, right? Like, I don't think he's just suddenly going to be a guy that you're going to see on the field a ton, but at least it gives them depth. They felt comfortable there. You also had another player from that position group, the running back group, that moved over to the corner, and that's John Randall Jr. He moved over as a running back, kind of more of a slender kid, wasn't able to put on the weight that he needed to. They didn't feel like he was going to be much of a factor at running back, so they put him out on the secondary and put him in a corner spot and have him as a contributing member of that side of the ball. He actually is an or designation with Cam Calhoun. I'm curious to see how that actually translates, how if he can get on the field and actually do something there, especially as Cam Calhoun, as Kyle mentioned, is kind of working his way back after what he called a setback. Cam actually announced it in the summer that he did have surgery, so this is not necessarily a surprise, but you may have noticed that he was absent from all the talk in fall camp after having a pretty decent spring showing. He did at least get that, so he's not super behind, but he's going to come in here, and he's working with the team right now, really getting into the thick of it, honestly, in next week. So we'll see how he factors in, but Kyle believes that, especially by the end of the year, he's going to be integral in this defense and be there. But with that said, that's a side tangent to John Randall moving to that position. You get him as a guy that potentially could now, see the different side of the ball and be a contributing member. I don't know how that'll work. I don't know if they feel comfortable enough there. They obviously do, in the sense that they're putting him on the depth chart. Interesting that he, only has been there for a couple weeks and is already beating out some guys that have been in the position. I don't know, take these depth charts with a grain of salt, but it is interesting nonetheless. And then the last player is Jonathan Hall. There's been a lot of talk about his potential at safety. In reality, though, he is very much so more of a linebacker body. They projected him there. They tried him out at safety, tried to see if he could do it. Maybe saw him as kind of a Chase Hansen type body, where you play him at safety and he has a lot of the physical gifts to be able to do it. But you put him now at linebacker, and maybe you can gain more weight and you can allow yourselves to be able to do a little bit more. Karene Reed yesterday said that moving Jonathan Hall into that position group actually is a breath of fresh air to some extent, because you have a guy that understands how the safety is played. So you're playing as a linebacker, but you understand the backfield behind you, right? You understand those guys and how they move. So if there's a breakdown, he knows how to position himself in a way that probably many linebackers don't, unless they've been familiar with that position. So in some ways, Karene was a little envious that he has that talent and skill just to be able to just pivot, really, and be able to adapt to whatever the defense is needing. So curious to see if any of these three players factor into the season. I think there's enough talent that, barring injuries, Utah shouldn't necessarily need to see any of these guys. But I think, by and large, this is a good move for all of them. I think it projects well for where they're at. If you're not seeing time at your respective position that you were recruited for, this becomes a good opportunity. So, like I said, nothing really out of the ordinary with this depth chart. Maybe a few key surprises if you haven't been paying attention to much, but interesting nonetheless. Outside of that, this is a season where Utah is coming in, and there's been a ton of talk about the offense, right? Everything has been about offense, and no duh that like everybody wants to talk about the offense. Nobody wants to talk about a defensive, great team. That's not to say that that's not the case at Utah. Obviously, having been spoiled for several years, Utah fans understand what a good defense can do for a team. And so I don't think any Utah fan takes that lightly. I just think you want to be able to be attracted to the offense, right, where things are a little bit more fun in terms of just highlight plays and different things that way. This is where it becomes really interesting to me for this Southern Utah game. So, traditionally, the FCS games, they just don't really have a lot of excitement value, depending on who you're playing, right? Like, as you saw, Montana State over the weekend in week 0, they got a win against Bronco Mendenhall's New Mexico. They were a favored team, and so this is not like FCS teams can't win. It happens every single year. These are fun games, especially, if it gets a little close. So, I want to put that respect with Southern Utah, but I think if this is a Utah team that we expect it to be, especially on offense, this has to be a team that dominates on that side of the ball, right? I don't necessarily think that it's going to be this perfect showing in the first week, and if it is, that's great for Utah, right? Like, I think that bodes well for their case that they can run the Big 12. But I don't also know that you're going to get a ton from this game. But with that said, I think this game itself presents a ton of intrigue. More intrigue than maybe normal, right? Yes, it's not the Florida game from last year where, a lot of the fans were super excited to see that return trip. You get an SEC team for the first time coming into Rice-Eccles Stadium. Bryson Barnes throws that 70-yard pass, and suddenly it's game on, right? There's not many things that can top that kind of environment. Having Michigan come in the first year of Jim Harbaugh coming back to college, those types of environments are really tough to replicate. But you need these FCS games, especially early, in my opinion, to be able to give yourself kind of a jump start, right? You want to be able to have that game that gives you more of kind of a glorified scrimmage, especially if you are a higher level team where you're not necessarily worrying about paying this team and losing to this team. Once again, not to say it couldn't happen, but I think all the rails would have to fall off for that to happen. But to me, this game becomes much more intriguing just simply because what is returning. You had last year where there were so many season-ending injuries, so many guys held out, that it was a tough toll on everybody, including me as a beat writer, who you just got kind of tired of talking about the same things, right? Injury. There came a point last season, where when we'd submit our request to talk to players to the athletic department each week, I looked around the roster and I'm honestly like, who do I talk to, right? Like, there's just not that many players to talk to anymore that are really going to, I don't want to say move the needle, but are really going to be impactful players. And so it became a challenge, and you ended up going to the same players a ton, and they got worn out of it, right? They don't want to continue to talk about it. But you're now coming into an era where, okay, Cam Rising is back. Brant Keithy is back. There's all these other guys, Van Fillinger is back and healthy. He played all last year, but he was riddled with injury. You got Junior Tafuna, who was struggling with injuries last year and still played a bit, but now he's fully healthy. You got Connor O'Toole, who many consider on that team to be the best pass rusher. He's now fully healthy and ready to go. You have all these players, Mekhi Bernard, he missed the entire season essentially. So you have this whole stable of players that are coming back, and I think that provides a ton of intrigue into this game, where normally an FCS game isn't going to provide that much intrigue, but I think just the nature of what took place last year, what is coming back, what the potential is for this team really makes this game an electric environment, right? That first time that Bad Moon Rising is played over the PA system, Rice-Eccles Stadium is going to erupt, right? And I think that's what makes this game so much fun. You want to see a team come out there for the first time. It's obviously college football, so you're going to be excited about it regardless. But you get the opportunity now to see this. And then you've added all these players. You've got Dorian Singer. You've got Damian Alford. You've got Carson Ryan, Caleb Lohner, all these guys that have come into the system now and that have improved this offense. And there's so much at their disposal, right? And I think that's what's so fun about this. Sure, Utah has to go out there and they have to prove it, right? It's easy to talk right now and say, oh, this Utah team could win the Big 12. Yeah, they could. They could absolutely be a factor in the college football playoffs. They can win a second round game. I guess it would be the quarterfinals. I think they have the talent to be able to do whatever they really want to if everything goes well. As we know, these things don't always pan out the way that they should, right? Florida State was undefeated last year and they didn't even get there. So things don't always pan out the way that they should or that teams want. Yes, the 12-team playoff opens that up more, but there's likelihoods that things could happen outside of Utah's control that could prevent some of these things. So I think the fun part is just seeing this on the field, right? Is just being able to have that opportunity. And it's funny talking to the players yesterday. We got only a few players because it's a short week, and so they kind of selected some of the players for us, 2 on offense, 2 on defense. And those 2 on offense were Cam and Brant, 2 guys that are obviously ready to go. Brant talked a little bit about kind of some of the nerves and having not played football really for about 2 years. That's tough. So that becomes a challenge. But talking to the 2 defensive players, you got Karene Reed and Junior Tafuna. Both of them, the first things that they said, what makes you most excited, it wasn't about their defense. A lot of the times you get these defensive players that are just like, yeah, I'm excited to play this game because I'm tired of hitting somebody else, right? You want to hit, these opponents that you don't care about is what they say. The first thing that both of these guys talked about was the offense. They are so excited to be able to see this offense. They want to be able to see this other side that has given them fits in fall camp. They want to see how it shows out on the field when you're going against teams that aren't yourself, right? And if they're putting this defense into fits, that can mean one of 2 things, right? This defense is either not up to snuff or this offense is incredibly talented because they're able to do it against this defense. So you've got a lot of I don't even know what to say, like the divide there, right? Like it could be either incredibly great or it could be, I don't want to say incredibly bad because I don't think that's the case. Last year was incredibly bad, so I think there's your benchmark. But I don't even know if you want to call that your benchmark. But you've got a lot of excitement. And at the end of the day, whether it's offense, whether it's the defense, and I will say as a side note, that defense is excited to be able to have a potent offense simply because after getting 3 and out every single time, that puts a lot of strain on that defense, right? They felt the pressure. Karene Reed talked about that. They felt the pressure last year to be the better side of the ball, to be able to really win Utah some games. To get them to 8 wins, there was a huge defensive effort that had to go into that. And he said that it was a huge relief to be able to have an offense that can kind of complement that. If not, I don't want to say be better, but better than the defense. I'm saying not better than last year. It is better than last year. But it's one of those things where it's nice to be able to have a team that can go out there. And sure, they might be able to go quick, right? There was many times in the years that Cam was starting in that 21-22 season where Utah's scoring within 2 to 3 minutes, right? It's a pretty fast offense, and they're able to move, really quickly. That puts the defense back out there. But that puts a little like pep in your step, right? You're coming out there, you're excited, you just saw what the offense did. You can go out there and now let's go for that shutout. There's a lot more energy that's tied into that. Whereas last year, okay, the offense just went 3 and out. Oh, maybe we got five plays this time. Maybe we got 7. We almost sniffed the red zone, but we're still coming out there. It's really demoralizing and it's tough. In one respect, it's they take it as a badge of honor to say, okay, we're going to be the one to win the game with defense. But that is tough. When things break down, when something happens, that becomes a difficult challenge, especially with the depth issues based on injuries and everything. That's a challenge. This year, they don't have that. At least on paper, they're not supposed to. And so when you have this complementary offense and defense, it becomes a breath of fresh air for everybody involved. And I think that's what everybody is most excited about, right? Is you want to be able to have a complementary side of the ball that's actually going to move it. But at the end of the day, all of this comes down to the health of Cam Rising. Yeah, Isaac Wilson is your backup, and he's a great backup, at least what we've heard from what he's done in practice. But he's not tested, right? We've seen what he can do at Corner Canyon, and he was obviously incredible at what he was able to do there. If he can translate that to the college level, and you have to hope that you get to see a large amount of Isaac Wilson reps on Thursday, that'll help. But it's hard to project Utah to continue to have the success that they are projected in if Cam Rising is not under center. And so that becomes the biggest factor for this team, where he has to be kind of the untouchable person. He's going to take hits, right? There's things that are going to happen, but he has to be able to be, as Kyle called him, he has to be upright. They have to keep him there. He has to be more of a pocket passer, which is mostly what he does. It's not like he runs a ton, but he has to be the guy that stays healthy. And once again, I'll go back to this because let me play a clip first from Kyle. There's been a lot of comments on Twitter about it based on what he said. So let me play this clip from Kyle, and we'll kind of get into that.
Well, physically, about the same guy, 220 pounds. He's what he's been for the last several years. He is going to be very judicious in his running, and we've had ad nauseum talks about that, and he's going to be a guy that really picks his spots and is going to be not trying to fight for that extra yard when there are situations where end of game or whatever where he's going to need to go ahead and throw it in there, but preservation is the key with him as far as when he decides to tuck the ball and run it. Very little QB run game. You're not going to see a whole lot of QB run game. But he's right now functioning as well as he ever has. His arm strength is back. The leg feels great, and just no limitations. I mean, he's ready to roll.
He's ready to roll. That's obviously a good sign. And we've heard that, I don't think there's any surprise there. But there was a lot of people that think that based on what they're saying is, trying to keep him preserved and there's not going to be a QB run game, that's going to take away from Cam Rising. This isn't going to take away from Cam Rising's ability, right? At the end of the day, Cam Rising is going to do whatever he can to win games. The hope is that Utah is going to be in enough of a situation where they don't have to rely on Cam. They don't have to rely on him being the guy that says, okay, we can't get anything from our running backs, or they're getting locked up. Let's use a QB keeper off the edge, to get us 5 yards or so. Those types of things are what's going to be limited. It's not that Cam is never going to run. He's going to run, right? He has to roll out of the pocket. There's going to be times where if he needs to extend the play and it's within reason and he can get to the sideline, those things are going to happen. He's still a playmaker. He has to do that. That's his job. But at the onset, it's not something where they're going to design a ton of plays for Cam to be the guy that runs the ball. Once again, guys can get injured outside of doing that, right? you can get sacked. You can get a weird step back where just something doesn't go right and you do something to your ankle or other things. This is more just an opportunity to limit the amount of hits that Cam can take. So this isn't any indictment on where Cam is as a player. They believe in him. They don't think that this is one of those things where he can't run or that he can't do what he needs to. It's just a matter of how they're going to try to do their best to preserve his health. And if that means not running him as much, so be it, right? But I think the way that Utah feels that they've got on their hands, they understand the talent that they have around him. And as long as that offensive line can do its job, which there's a lot of faith in that offensive line, and yes, you have a redshirt freshman coming in at left tackle, and you have a sophomore at right tackle, there is this mostly veteran group there that they feel confident in. And if they can do their job, there should be a whole bunch of assets and weapons for Cam to be able to utilize, right? You've got at least 3 backs, if not 4, if you had Dijon Stanley in there, that can do a great job of running. At least we expect that, right? We'll see it on the field. We'll see if it works. There's been years where Utah's run game hasn't been great. Some of that is offensive line. Some of it is the running backs, yada, yada, yada. Outside of that, you've got, like I said, those 6 tight ends. You've got those wide receivers. Cam shouldn't have to be in a situation where they need to say, okay, we're going to put his body on the line for a 3rd and 1. They've got enough talent. In theory, they should be able to do what they can to be able to move the chains in a way that doesn't rely on him extending the plays. Is Cam going to do that? 100%. Cam is the guy that, yes, they've had to preach this several times to him because he's just a guy that wants to win. And when you get into that situation where, maybe it's a tight game or things kind of click and you want to kind of have that competitive drive, he's going to engage, right? He's going to do that. I think you can't teach that out of somebody. I think you have to work with them and understand the situational awareness and say, okay, do we need this 3rd down right here? Is this going to hurt us if we don't get this 3rd down if Cam doesn't run? That's where he has to take it to that next level, right? He has to understand, okay, am I better off just throwing the ball outside? Am I better at taking a shot somewhere? Or am I better at running or just whatever? It's going to be much more mental than anything else with Cam and just trying to figure out where he needs to be. Fortunately for Utah, Cam is very locked in there. He understands things very well. He understands the situational awareness of the game and how it's played. He does it in a quick manner. That's not to say he's not going to make mistakes or that he can't make mistakes, but he understands that very well. And so it's more just preaching that into him that you don't have to be the hero in this offense. You've got so many assets. You've got the ability to be able to do it, sure, but you've got many people around you that can help. Now, if this comes to a situation where, Utah is on a 4th quarter drive and they need a touchdown or they need a 1st down to extend that drive, 100%, if Cam is the guy, Cam is going to happen. You've got to take that risk, and Cam will take that every single day of the week. He'll own it up to Kyle Whittingham and Andy Ludwig if they scream at him for doing it. This is how it is. You want a guy in that backfield that is going to go to war with you. And that's what Cam is. They respect him because he doesn't just talk the talk. He walks the walk. He does everything. He is the guy that's going to jump in there and do it if he needs to. The real question is just if he needs to. So I'm curious to see how that develops this year. It's going to be funny when the first play of the game is a Cam Rising roll out of the pocket and run for 7 yards or something, right? Just because, and all Twitter will go crazy and the whole world will explode. But this is a situation where this isn't going to limit Cam. It has the potential in some respects in the sense that he's not going to naturally think to run first. But look, this is not something where Cam is going to be that guy that's just like, I don't know what to do. I can't run. He's physically healthy. He's able. They just want to preserve his health. As Kyle said, it's all about I can't even talk. You know what I'm saying. They want to preserve him and make sure that he's healthy. Because at the end of the day, if Cam Rising is not healthy, this becomes much more of a challenge. That's not an indictment on Isaac Wilson. They truly believe that he is the guy that can take over if Cam is there with as little step down, if at all possible. I've heard things outside of this that Isaac is, I don't want to say on par with Cam, but he's got the talent that is pushing Cam in practice. So I don't think there's a question of natural ability. It's more just understanding the offense, understanding how it works at the Division I level, that kind of stuff, right? So that's kind of how this all works. This whole team is going to be revolved around Cam Rising, and if they can get that done, everything's going to be fine. We'll see how it translates. This will be a fun thing to be able to see Thursday. Outside of that, look, let's just talk about the games. Like, I want to be able to get into this. We can continue to hypothesize and speculate about what this team can be, but let's just go get to the games. I hope you're excited. I know you're excited. But I hope that you have a fun game day, and that when we come back on Monday or Tuesday, whenever I decide to do this podcast, that we have some fun things to talk about. We'll overreact on some things because that's just what college football does. But I'm excited to kind of get into the season and share it with you, and I look forward to getting back at this because it's football season. So look forward to it, and we'll catch you next week after having been able to see a real game. That'll be the best opportunity. So with that, I sign out and have a wonderful day.